I'm a rapper, I'm not a poet. Poet, I'm not a rapper. Guess it's opposite there, cause you niggas just got it backwards. Got me sick to my stomach. Go up on my lantern. New trio is Frio, the most terrible tandem. Deliver shock value, but no, not Timberlanding. Critical observation alerting you ambulances. Clap on and clap off. Rap on and rap off. Hard times for hard rhymes, that concrete, that asphalt. If I did look twice, I guess that's her asphalt. May I assist you and score, get my pass out. Matter of fact, it's what you need. To rest you just fatigue. See, technically I'm foul, and Mrs. Wallace, I'm Rashid. Know this beat is a banger, have no reason for anger. If I'm slightly deterred, you know I'm giving the finger. I'm a savage like Corey, but not in need of Topanga. Right like 90 degrees, you in the need of an angle.
Welcome to the Free Lunch Podcast. This is your boy Tight, and I got my boy BG with me. What's going on?
What's happening there? Free Lunch Podcast. We back at it one more time. How you feel, Tight?
Man, I can't be more excited today than I ever been to do it.
You excited? You excited?
Oh man, it's that time of the year. It's the holiday season. I heard my song last night.
What song is that?
You know, whenever you hear two songs, I know it's that time of the year.
Which is that?
The first one is Temptation Silent Night.
Silent Night, yeah, classic.
And the second one is, what do the lonely do at Christmas?
That's your song?
Oh, what do the lonely do at Christmas time? So when I hear them two, BG, I know it's the holiday season.
Well, holiday season is definitely upon us.
It's the season to give.
It's the season to give. I'm excited myself, bro. Family time is on the way.
Yeah. But for today's podcast, I'm a little extra excited.
You excited and I'm nervous. Go figure that.
So we got a special guest today.
Yes, we do. Very special guest. Very special guest. Elder statesman, person with a lot of knowledge, a lot of wisdom, and gonna be a different perspective for this show. So you excited? I'm nervously excited.
Should we?
Podcast audience.
She already.
See what I'm talking about? But go ahead.
I was special guest. I was gonna bring you in. You know, we got a special guest, and the reason why she's so special, she's an elder statesman, a scholar, knowledgeable, is what's the right word I'm gonna say? Is the person that has really shed the light in my life, definitely in the co-host of the podcast, BG's life, a mother figure. And with no further ado, I'd like to introduce the Free Lunch Podcast audience to Miss G.
Again, great morning. I just want to thank you guys for allowing me to come on and shed my views, in particular to an issue that is of great concern to me.
Okay, so BG.
What up?
Who is Miss G to you?
Yeah, I guess people can put 1 + 1 and get 2, but Miss G is my mother, the person that I have gotten a lot from, like you say, a lot of perspective and a lot of wisdom, and really has been the powering force in terms of encouraging me to be outspoken, to have some values, and to be able to speak on those values in a very direct and clear-cut manner. So a lot of what you get from me on this podcast is a result of a lot of the conversations that she and I have when we're just talking about certain things and certain issues that go on. So what you're going to get today is that next level of perspective, like we always say. So I think we're ready for it, man. It should be a good show. Should be a good combination of generation. So with all this going on, this conversation, we should be able to cover a lot of things and definitely leave the people with more than what they came with.
Definitely. I mean, this is kind of what hashtag New South Movement is all about. I think today's topic is very relevant. in pushing the Southern culture forward and providing factual information and perspectives from individuals that may reside in the actual area that we're going to talk about. So I'm gonna try to limit some of the entertainment pieces so that I can really utilize the time that we have with Miss G and really get a perspective that I think the audience is gonna learn a lot from. So, with that being said, I'm gonna jump right into you know what.
Oh, you ain't gonna leave that part out, huh?
Not at all. Why would I?
Well, I mean, you said you were cutting out some stuff, so I didn't know, man. But I'm glad that you're gonna stick to the script.
Miss G, you ever listen to the podcast, Miss G?
I have listened before.
And one of your favorites has to be when we do this part right here, right?
I'm assuming that you're singing.
It could be rap. Now, sometimes he rap, so you just gotta kind of hold your breath and keep your finger crossed.
I hope I do the right thing. So here we go. You ready?
Ready.
Yeah. Imagine you on that bridge. And,
What bridge is that?
well, we gonna talk about it in the show, but just imagine you call it the bridge. They need to get off that bridge sometime.
That bridge. Yeah.
And we can explain what that bridge is in a minute. But imagine you on that bridge, you locked arms, and you singing this one right here. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. So that's all I'm going to give them today.
Oh, deep in my heart,
Go ahead.
I do believe
Yes.
we shall overcome someday. You can't not finish that one. You got to see that one through.
Yes.
We shall overcome. That's a monumental song, man. It's a lot of those words. So that really does set the tone for what we talking about.
And just to get the people a glimpse of what we're going to talk about today, and the reason why we have Miss G joining us today is really to talk about the upcoming film produced by Oprah Winfrey and I believe Lee Danielson, right? The movie Selma.
Now, I think they actually got another
Producer, director.
another producer, director on that one, another director on that one.
Okay, but we know definitely by Harpo Films and by Oprah Winfrey, and really as part of the New South movement and really pushing the Southern culture forward, I think it's only appropriate that we kind of talk to our two Selma residents in BG, the 2-7 kid. 2-7 represents Selma, and Miss G, who has actually lived in Selma for years, and really just get your perspectives kind of around the state of Selma today, kind of around what was it like when Oprah was actually there filming, how long was she there filming, and really kind of your perspectives of what you would like to see come from the film when it kind of comes out. And then once it comes out, maybe we can do another show post the actual film to kind of discuss your views and your thoughts centered around the actual show, the actual airing of the film. But with that said, Miss G, really like to get your perspective on how long have you lived in Selma, some of the historic things that you've seen as you lived in Selma, and then we can kind of just take the conversation from there.
We came to Selma in 1978, and at that time we were 13 years past Bloody Sunday and the march from Selma to Montgomery. And at that time, there was some events, activities that you still knew that something was going on here. In 1965, I was a young kid and really did not know what had happened here. But there was not a lot of talk at that time about Bloody Sunday or the march from Selma to Montgomery. So you could feel the tension. You knew something had gone on here, but people were kind of not willing to talk about, and still are not willing to talk about, what was happening in Selma, Dallas County, and the country as a whole, that during that time that had brought us to the point in 1965 where it was necessary to have a march to Montgomery and a Bloody Sunday to happen on the Edmund Pettus Bridge.
Oh, and that was 1978. You say you moved to Selma?
Mm-hmm.
In 1978, we moved to Selma. But remember that this movie is featuring the march from Selma to Montgomery. And, of course, that centers around Bloody Sunday, which catapulted the movement to get the Voting Rights Act.
What brought you to Selma in 1978, if you don't mind me asking?
In 1978, there were, in my profession, limited opportunities. And at that time, Selma was the only place where I could get a job to practice my craft.
Oh, wow. Really?
As a matter of fact, there weren't many people in my profession at that time who were African American and who were not working for government agencies, in particular the federal government. So to get a job, I had to come to Selma, Alabama, to a hospital, which is now a historic hospital, the Good Samaritan Hospital, to get a job because there were limited opportunities for people of African descent at that time.
So that was 13 years post Bloody Sunday. So just give the people that may not be as familiar with the story or what Bloody Sunday was, BG, can you or Miss G give kind of a perspective surrounding actual Bloody Sunday and I guess what the film is going to try to portray during that particular time?
Well, the 60s, as we know, and we've talked about it, and there's much documentation on what the 60s, the 50s, and the 40s were all about as it relates to the African American community. And the civil rights movement, you see civil rights there, was basically all those civil rights acts and movements were centered around Black people having access to their civil liberties, the liberties that are in the Declaration of Independence and in the Constitution and all those documents that our country is founded upon. So it was basically movement to get Black people recognized and covered by the laws that we are to claim as American citizens. And so in the 60s, you know, with Dr. King as a major figurehead, and then all of those other civil rights leaders were in position to lead this movement. And so Selma was one of many focal points throughout the South in terms of places where people were coming together and basically making demonstrations and letting their voice be heard in terms of their want and their desire to be treated as full American citizens. So Selma, as we see, Bloody Sunday was kind of on the front end of the movement. We hear a lot about the actual march from Selma to Montgomery that was successful, but before there was a successful march, there was a disastrous attempt at marching, where the marchers assembled, walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, got to the other side of the bridge on their way to Montgomery, and they were met by state troopers, policemen, basically in position to stop that march from happening. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then from that, you'll see it if you YouTube, but you'll see the footage of what happened after that. In an attempt to just basically force the marchers back across the street, you see dogs, you see horses, you see policemen brutalizing African Americans in the street, you see tear gas, you see all these things. Mm-hmm. And this was before Dr. King actually came to Selma. But you can just imagine that there was news media, there was every type of journalist and photographer there capturing this moment in time. And the day became known as Bloody Sunday because of that reason. It occurred on the Sunday, and it turned out to be a treacherous event. But this event got a lot of press, a lot of publication. It went out across the world. And so it touched the sentiment of people who were concerned about humanity, who were concerned about the movement. And so it drew a lot of attention. A lot of people after that moment came to Selma, centered around Selma. And then that set the tone for the big, massive Selma to Montgomery march that we hear so much about. So that moment showed a lot of things. It showed that the people came together in solidarity with a central focus in mind, going to Montgomery, which is the state capital, to stand on those steps to demand that civil rights and that voting rights be granted and be, I guess, adhered to as it stands for the African American community. But then on the other side, you see Jim Crow in the form of those officers, in the form of those troops standing in the way, impeding the progress. So it's a lot of symbolism in that moment. There's a lot of history in this town. And so I guess for me, and I'll let Mom speak on it. For me, what I hope for in this movie, and what I feel like it's going to capture that moment in time. But what we should also be looking for is some of the background stuff, some of the lead up to that moment, some of the instrumental figures that you don't hear a lot about, but that were very important to getting this whole thing started and moving in the right direction. So I think it's owed to the people to have that story, so that we don't get necessarily caught up in just the surface level of the marches and those particular highlights and those moments that gain so much history and so much that people talk about a lot. But some of those hidden and those behind the scenes heroes that played just equally as important of a role to getting things accomplished and moving in the right direction.
One key issue that we should focus on is, well, two people in particular. Mr. and Mrs. Boynton were both Tuskegee Institute graduates, and the husband was an extension agent, and they came to Selma, I believe, in the early 30s and tried to get people registered to vote and met a lot of resistance. So the issue that was developing in the South at that time was getting people registered to vote. Because remember, in 1963, that was a march on Washington, I believe. And so out of that came the Civil Rights Act. So now we're talking about getting people registered to vote. So there were some activists throughout the South who were trying to get African Americans registered to vote. And so in Marion, Alabama, which is in Perry County, 2 weeks before Bloody Sunday, and Bloody Sunday occurred March the 7th, 1965, a young man named Jimmy Lee Jackson was murdered in Marion. And so the people decided then that they were going to take Jimmy Lee Jackson's body to Montgomery and place it on the step of the Capitol of Alabama. Jimmy Lee Jackson had been murdered in Marion trying to protect his grandmother from a state trooper who actually ended up murdering him. And in this county, about 3 or 4 years ago, that state trooper was only given, I think, 3 months in jail for murdering the person who served to start the movement, the march from Selma to Montgomery.
He was just recently tried, that state trooper?
Yes, within the last 3 to 4 years, by an African-American district attorney that is office out of Selma, Alabama. That gentleman only got 3 to 4 months, and he was allowed to go to his home county to serve that time. So the other issues surrounding getting registered to vote, there are a group called the Courageous Eight. So that movie does not recognize the Courageous Eight, and Mrs. Boynton would be one of those people. Reverend F.D. Reese would be one of those people. Mrs. Marie Foster would be one of those people. And there are some others. Most of these people were educators, and they were trying to go to the Dallas County Courthouse to register to vote. So the event of Bloody Sunday was centered, in my opinion, around 2 things: the murder of Jimmy Lee Jackson and the Courageous Eight and the people of Dallas County trying to become registered voters.
You catch that Courageous Eight, and that piggybacks on something that we talked about in terms of that 8 versus 80. So you see that the efforts of a few fuel the movement of many. So, that was one of the things. There's so much. One thing to remember: there's so much symbolism in this time period. There's so many things that we can draw from this time period that are applicable to where we are now. talking about the 8, and you're talking about a bridge, trying to come over the bridge and get to somewhere, and then meeting some type of fight back or obstacle that's getting in your way, and how do you combat, or how do you react to the stimuli that's in front of you. So there's a lot of things, and why it's so important for us to be in tune to what was, so that we can have somewhat of a blueprint and a guideline for where we need to get to. So
what about Miss G, the Courageous 8? Can you have any more knowledge about those individuals? Because I would be interested myself to see if the movie even captures those individuals.
I really don't know all of them, but I know of the names, but I can't call them all right off right now. But then there was Reverend Anderson, who was a minister at one of the local churches, who, see, people were afraid to even allow people to meet and have mass meetings at their churches for fear that they would be bombed, or people were afraid to even show up at the mass meetings because the white council and the KKK would come and monitor tag numbers and then go back and look these people up. A lot of people lost their jobs on the basis of trying to stand up here in Selma, Dallas County to get the right to vote. Reverend Reese was an educator. He's still living today. He's still active at his church. There was another gentleman, Mr. Doyle, who was also active in trying to get the right to vote. And his wife actually had to leave town. She was an educator, to go out of town to get a job. And in that process, lost her life. Mrs. Marie Foster was I think she worked in a dentist's office here. So most of these people had to be independent, working on their own in order for them to participate in the process. Today, that still is an issue for people to stand up in Selma, Dallas County. If you dare to stand up and you're working for some of these local people, you will stand to lose your job or be retaliated against. There were many young people who were students at the local high school, black high school at that time, which is R.B. Hudson. Their parents lost their jobs. People were just actually afraid to participate. That's why it's so critical and it's shameful that people do not take the right to vote serious when so many people had to suffer and give so much in order for us to have the right to vote.
Well, let's fast forward. We kind of gave a historic perspective on Bloody Sunday. BG, I would like your opinion as well as Ms. G on the current state of Selma, given that Ms. G, you moved there in 1978, and now that it's 2014, has there been a lot of change from your perspective as far as to the tension, is there racism still that exists? Just the whole perspective of the current state of Selma today.
Racism still exists. As we see, it still exists here, and it still exists throughout the country. For me, what she was talking about in terms of that fear of retaliation, it set a mindset. It set a mind state. And it set a mind state in the black community. You don't say certain things. You don't do certain things. You don't speak out for what's right or what's going to benefit you because of the fear of losing a job or the fear of someone harassing you because you have stepped out there and stood up for what's right. And so you see this suppression of people really being devoted to moving in a positive direction, to working to better their own situation. They would rather, because they're afraid, stay where everything is, don't rock the boat, and let things be, which is an adverse situation. Because if you do that, if you cower down and you back up to someone that already doesn't care about you, doesn't care about your situation, you're going to get pushed farther and farther down. You're going to get further away from access. You're going to get further away from resources. And then you have a generation of people coming after you that's going to be dealing with that same situation or a worse situation. So it does nothing for the community as a whole, but that mind state has been set into the community. And so what I see coming up, knowing the place, is that I see a lot of my people that could be doing better but they tend to not want to know what to do better. And so they have there's no enthusiasm to get to that next level. People are just going along to get along. And when we're stuck in a situation, our economic situation is in the pits. People are struggling financially. Living situations are subpar. And then you just see it in the youth to where kids are not aspiring to do anything. You got a lot of kids that are in violence, going to jail, this whole criminal pattern that's developed because we're in this trap, we're in these walls, and nobody has created expectation. We don't place an expectation or a standard on a lot of these kids because of that mind state, and it's affecting them. They rather be criminals, they rather be thugs, they rather just stay here versus setting a goal and aspiring to get somewhere and getting out of this place, and then maybe coming back and being a positive contributor to the space. So what you see from 1965 and now is the remnants of those institutions that were put into place to hold black people back. And they're working in real time. Hopefully, with more of us as 80s babies, we're kind of that bridge to connect those two time periods. We're in the middle. So hopefully if we continue to come back and maybe be positive role models to our peers and positive role models to the youth that are behind us, then maybe we can kind of shed a light and encourage people to come out of that fear and stand up for what's right. Because ironically enough, I know now the majority of the city of Selma is black. We're greater than, getting very close to 90% African American community. But when it comes down to legislation, when it comes down to political action, when it comes down to where the city is going, black people have no voice. And I would like to say that that's very similar to a lot of places across the country where those same statistics exist, but we're at the bottom of the totem pole.
Ms. G, did you want to add to that? Because I do have some questions just being an outsider looking in, right? And I kind of wonder, each and every year we kind of, I don't want to use the word honor, but we remember Bloody Sunday. We have top elected officials, Attorney General, ex-presidents, current presidents, junior senators that were running for president visit Selma during the time to remember Bloody Sunday. And then I visited Selma a few times. And I kind of wonder, even when BG, when you took me over to the bridge, to the bridge and the memorial over there, it was, for lack of better words, it was below standards for it to be a memorial. What is the current economic state when you have so many officials, when you have Oprah coming to the city to do a film? What is the current economic state, and why haven't we seen more economic growth and more modernization of a city like Selma, which is such a pioneer and such a, it may not be pioneer, but such a state that's highly visited because of the events that took place there?
It's because of the leadership. When you don't have people in place who understand what the issues are and have the courage to address the issues the way that they should be addressed. Selma, the poverty level for 51% of the children in Selma live in poverty. So that kind of tells you the economic status of Selma, African Americans in Selma, Alabama. So the leadership has not taken advantage in a positive way to do the things that will make this place grow, as opposed to taking advantage of the situation for personal development, benefiting personally. As a matter of fact, we elected our first African American mayor in this city I think it's been probably about 16 years ago. We were making some progress, but he was like President Obama. The white establishment and those elitist black people in this community didn't seem to support him, and as a result, we have a mayor now who is supported by the minority white community and the elitist black community, and they are self-serving. So if Oprah came to Selma and she does not portray the current economic status and the status of African American people and people in general. There are some poor white people in Selma, Dallas County as well, because Dallas County is in the Black Belt, and we have some of the highest levels of poverty in this country. And so if she doesn't portray what is really going on in this city, to come and to portray the historic part of it, but you don't adequately portray what is happening here now, 50 years. Next year, we will be celebrating 50 years after the March to Selma. And it will be 51 years after the Civil Rights Act. But we're still stuck probably in a worse situation than we were in 1965, because people were employed as domestics, farmers, and that kind of thing, janitors. But those jobs are pretty much gone. There probably might have been a few who had jobs working in industry, but now we just have so much poverty and lack of unemployment and lack of opportunities. And I want to say this about our elected officials in this city. We cannot even have fair elections in this city. Our elections are now hijacked by African American people who go into the low economic areas in our community, low informed people, and steal their votes. So we can't have elections that are fair and elect people who will really represent us. We're in a 70% county, and we have one African American serving in a countywide elected position. We just recently had our county elections for state assessor, tax assessor, tax collector, and sheriff, and all of them were reelected and ran on a Democratic ticket when in fact, they are Republicans. And they did that with the support of African American people. So what does that tell you about the people in Selma, Dallas County, and how progressive minded the African American community as a whole, when you have a population of 20,000 folks and maybe 9,000 show up to vote? 20,000 people registered to vote and 9,000 show up to vote, and you still elect 3 top elected officials in your county who are really Republicans but are ran as Democrats. Just go figure at where we are in Selma, Dallas County.
Interestingly enough, we say in white and black, but really when it comes down to it, it stems back to what you're talking about. It's the economic disparity between the haves and the have-nots. And for us, the black community is definitely suffering, but there are white citizens that are suffering as well. But because of their skin color, they have to assimilate and fit in with that superior white voice who still, even though they share the same race, don't even have their best interests at hand. And we see that across the country. So it really comes down. People have to empower themselves and become knowledgeable about what's going on, no matter what your race is, to look at what matters to you. And for us, it's about employment. It's about finances and being able to support your family. And so as a people, that's the way that we need to vote. And that's the way that we need to hold our political leaders accountable to that. If your platform is not centered around making the people's situation better, if you're not focused on making your constituency's situation better, if you're just focusing on what you want and your access, then we can't have you and we can't support you. But you have to become knowledgeable about what's what in order to make those type of decisions and to put that type of pressure on these politicians and to put it on all of your civil servants and what's going on in your community. And then we take that further to what's going on in our nation.
BG,
what's up?
What keeps you there? What keeps you in Selma, given everything that was just communicated? I can understand why your mother and father would continue to reside in Selma. That's home. Selma is also home for you. But given you are progressive, you are you have a doctoral degree. Um, you're a scholar. You're a leader. Why continue to reside in an area in a city in which it seems like there's no growth and it's only the same old story with limited economic growth and the same old poverty story? Why do you continue to kind of stay around that area?
Sometimes you got to go home, man. Selma is home for me. And so with what I've been able to acquire, you talk about just the degrees and the profession and all that type of stuff. There's opportunity for that stuff here. She talked about being in the Black Belt area. Not only is the Black Belt one of the most impoverished places in the country, but it's also one of the most unhealthy places in the country. Is one of the less educated places in the country. So when I see that and I'm connected to this place and I feel like I can come back and just share my experience, and if nothing else, I can come back and talk to a kid that went to the same elementary school, went to the same high school, or played in the same youth league that I played in, and talk to him about give my testimony and tell my story and shed that light. Or I can talk to the man and his wife, and man dealing with diabetes. I can use my knowledge about diabetes and give them the type of information on a relatable level that they might not get from going to the doctor's office when the doctor doesn't really have time to talk to them. But I'm from here. I speak the language. I know what a typical meal looks like. So I'm in better position to educate and give people some type of insight on where they are and where they need to be to. And it's hard for me to not be here. It's hard for me to not be here, to see what's going on, and to see where opportunities are for me to give back and make a difference where I can, because I'm of debt to the place. I'm of debt to the people, because there are great people in Selma of all races that have played an instrumental role in where I am now. So it's expected of me to come back and show that same type of fervor and that same type of enthusiasm for somebody else that's looking for a light, that's looking for an example or a role model, to get out of here, and then get out of here, see the world, gain some other experiences, and then bring that back for the next person. Because that's what that bridge is about. That bridge is about connecting the past and the future, and providing opportunity, getting to another place, and then being able to come back across it and share what you've got with the people that matter to you most. So that's kind of the answer in long.
Miss G, we kind of coming in on our time, and we do want to invite you back post the showing of the actual movie. But you and I have spoken several times, and you've kind of schooled me, you've kind of educated me. I really want to just give you the remainder of the time, as long as you want to go, to kind of educate the audience and really just share your thoughts and views in general on any topic, any conversation that you would like to just share with the listeners, that they can kind of just take away from this.
Selma is really not a whole lot different from a lot of places in America. But because of the racial makeup, and because we do have some people here who still advocate and who still call the issues out. But if you look back at Ferguson, Missouri, at the time that Michael Brown was killed, they had one black police person on the police force. The people were not voting. The mayor is white. So you compare Ferguson to Selma, where the economic status might not be the same. Many of the issues that are impacting Selma are issues that are impacting African American people all over this country. We had a speaker at our men's day on Sunday who's a medical doctor, but also a preacher. And he expressed that he's concerned about the black race. So why should we be concerned about the black race in 2014 going into 2015, the celebrating 50 years after the march to Selma to Montgomery march to get the Voting Rights Act, which impacted black folks all over America? What people need to understand is voting empowers all of us. It puts all of us on the same level. One vote, one man. And if we don't vote, then we really don't have a voice. You have to exercise your right to vote. Then what else do we do with that vote? We have to make sure that we're putting people in office who are really genuinely concerned about the people. We hear about the Tea Party and all of these folks and what their issues and agendas are. But we have to have genuine people who are really concerned about what will impact all of us. We should really be concerned about this immigration issue because African Americans will be becoming the third tier in the number of population in this country. I don't have a problem with other people coming, but when other people come, they tend to look down, continue to look down and ostracize us African people. President Obama acknowledges all immigrants and all people who have shown up here in this country in his two most recent speeches, but he did not acknowledge people of African descent and how we got here. Is that he's ashamed to acknowledge what happened to us and why we're here? But we as African people have to stand on what we know and who we are and not let anyone minimize our impact and what we contribute to this country. America would not be what it is today had not African Americans stood up and built just the foundation of this country, but even the education aspect of it and what we contributed to make people free and give them hope to be free and to become first-class citizens all over this world. There's a tremendous sacrifice here in Selma, Alabama. A lot of the people who then were 18, 19, 20 years old are now 60, 70 years old. And what do they have to show for the contribution and the abuse that they had? I have a friend who told me that on that Sunday, she was probably 10th or 11th grade. She was on the bridge. A gentleman on a horse ran her down, attempted to run her down. And the safe haven for those young people, many of them lived in GWC homes, which was the projects. Brown Chapel Church served as one of the instrumental places where the people could come and stand together and have the mass meetings. The projects were the safe haven, and many of the people who participated in Bloody Sunday were poor children out of the project. But they are the ones who have gotten the least recognition for their contribution. So, and she also told me that day that it was the mailman, it was the milkman, it was the people that you saw every day who were running them down that day when they were trying to attempt to cross their bridge. So what does that say about who we are today? How did they make a difference? They boycotted the money, and we are some of the most free people giving our money and our resources. We need to take an issue from the Rosa Parks movement in Montgomery with the bus boycott, and we need to take a page from how our young people and the people in this community in 1965 told these people, we're not taking this anymore. Not only are we going to march to Montgomery, but we're also going to keep our money and our finances in our pocket. When people were still willing to sacrifice their economic means to stand up for our right to vote and sacrifice and not all did. There were some people, and I would say the educated, the elitist people in this community protected what they had. It was the poor who gave up everything, gave up the little jobs that they had in order for us to have the right to vote in 1965 and what we continue to share. But as the president has said, he heard the 2/3 who voted for the Republican Tea Party, and he heard from the 1/3 or vice versa who didn't vote at all. So in 2016, in the next election, for the podcast listeners, I would hope that what has been said here today will help you to understand how important it is and the sacrifices that have been made to give you the power that you have, the great equalizer, which is your right to vote. And thank you guys for allowing me to come on today.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, BG, that kind of, for me, this entire conversation does two things for me, BG. Number one, it provides perspective on what's actually going on, not only in Selma, but in the world. Miss G kind of showed the relationship of Selma and what's going on in Ferguson. And in a lot of instances, the story of Selma is a microcosm or a small replica of what's happening in the world.
Exactly.
So the symbolism that you kind of talked about and you kind of touched on with the Courageous Eight, which was something that I learned today. And like I tell a podcast audience, if you sit down and talk to Miss G, you're gonna learn something. But with the Courageous Eight, with the bridge, the symbolism kind of mentioned there. In a lot of instances, what this podcast is kind of centered around and what you and I have kind of birthed, this hashtag New South movement, was demonstrated during today's podcast. Having the knowledge and the expertise, the scholar and educator Ms. G kind of educate the audience and help us to understand what our history is, but also using technology, i.e. a podcast, which is new technology for those in the South and something that we're kind of pushing forward, but using that to kind of push our mission forward, in addition to showing, your perspective and my perspective, but a fresh perspective that's not being discussed. And hopefully, and I'm going to let you summarize too, but hopefully this movie that comes out that's being produced by Oprah and Harpo Networks or what have you, hopefully some of what we talked about today is kind of portrayed. I do want to invite Miss G back and kind of do a post-movie conversation to really get a sense of your views and your thoughts on the actual movie when it comes out. But in summary or in conclusion, this is what New South Movement is about. It's about pushing the culture forward and knowing your history and educating your listeners, but at the same time doing it in a modernized way. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, and the New South movement is composed of diverse perspectives, young, old, male, female, all ethnicities and all that kind of stuff, because it's going to take us working together, listening to each other, and taking bits and pieces of what's being shared and bringing it and making a collective movement out of it. So I really do appreciate Mom for coming in and taking some time and talking with us. Either way it goes with the movie, I'm proud to see a movie title that just says Selma. So when everybody sees Selma, they'll think about me. So I really do have an appreciation for that. And even if it doesn't get into all the details or really give the full story and touch on some of the things we talked about today, there's a lot of information out there. There's the internet, there's the YouTube that you can go to and fill in the gaps. And above all else, I'm right here. So anytime you want to come and see some of these places, go hear some of these people, just come down and we'll make sure that you get what you need. Because like you say, then it was a catapult for a larger moment in time, for an advancement of the movement. But even now, it still serves as that same central figure that gives us an idea of the pulse of the country. Things that are going on here, like it's been said, are going on all over the world. So we have to acknowledge what our current status is. Our current status is not good. As it goes, our outlook is not good. So we've got to accept that and recognize that, and then commit to making steps to alleviate that and to get on better footing. Make it a commitment to voting, making a commitment to education, whatever education it is, something that's going to propel you and put you in a situation to sustain yourself. Doesn't necessarily always have to be white collar. It could be a decent trade towards entrepreneurship, but something to get you economically sound. We've got to make sure that our spirits are right, that our mental health is also an important thing. We have to really have some type of concern for mental health issues and making sure that our mental health issues are being taken care of. Looking at the whole thing, man, it's time to make some new history. We've sat on the work and on the backbone of those that have come before us. So now it's our turn to carry the torch and make some new history so that they can one day say that, you know, XYZ was instrumental in making this happen in 2014 or in 2016. And not so much waiting on somebody else to do it. You can do it in your community, mentoring just a few small kids, volunteering in the community. Do something to show your commitment to progressing the people forward. And I think we have another comment.
I just want to say this to the audience. What has kept African Americans in prison or stuck is because we don't have enough economic independence. So my challenge is, in order for us to be free, in order for us to be recognized and not always boxed in as people who are just taking advantage of the system, is that we have to focus on becoming more economically independent. And with that, people cannot control us, because it is, as it was in 1965, and as it always has been, they could control us by controlling our ability to provide for ourselves.
Yeah, they say that that if you summed up the economic or the income of all African Americans in the United States, we would be the 14th largest country in the nation. In the world. So that's how much money we have, but do we utilize it as a unit to be proactive and productive in our community? So that's true.
And we should talk about.
So how can the people get a hold of us?
Well, contact us, freelunchpodcast.blogspot.com for blogs and podcasts. You can also check for us on Instagram, Free Lunch Podcast, and give us some comments or just some feedback on Twitter, Free Lunch Pod C.
And this was the perfect podcast. I think we did our due diligence on this one.
We did it again.
Take us out.
No, you take us out. We ain't breaking the script, man. Stick to it.
Man, I think this would be perfect for you. You don't want to do it?
You got it.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday.
The remix.
But I gotta say this though before I go. What's on your cotton picking, pea picking, triple X rated, misguided mind? We out of here.
Mr. Power, Jail Chestnut. Out of here. Free Lunch Podcast.
Ought to be sorry you gotta pardon me. Pardon me, I'm speaking it awkwardly. Charles Barkley, barking, they ain't biting. I'm getting that green broccoli. Properly giving props to the problem, fulfill prophecy. It gotta be better than that. It gotta be obsolete. Obviously, niggas rolling the dice and this ain't Monopoly. My purpose was to do it on purpose. Fucking apology.